Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we're here for the 22nd in a 34-ish part series as we journey chapter by chapter through Fairy Tale by Stephen King. What we've got is we've got comments from the last video, then we've got a So What Happened section, then we have a Lit Crit portion, and finally we will have writer's notes from this chapter from Fairy Tale by Stephen King. Comments from last time. We start with Freddie. I had mentioned that I don't think I will ever read this book again. It's not terrible. It just probably isn't something that is going to compel me towards or through a second reading of this book. Freddie asks, what is the greatest book you can't/won't read again? And I want your answers too, because I think this is a very compelling question. I think this is interesting, not necessarily as much in the answers as much as in the reasons why. I don't think I will ever make it through Absalom again. That was an absolute tooth-pulling of a read from William Faulkner. But there is the sort of myriad ways at which that story is approached, these sort of mangled character building that we get from that novel is absolutely top of the line. It is something that I've never gotten from any other novel ever, anywhere, period. Even from other Faulkner. But it was like having teeth pulled to read that thing. And I've come across several books that I'm probably never going to read again. That's the greatest one. That's the greatest book I don't think I'll ever read again. And the reason why, I'm getting up there in years a little bit, guys. And the more I think about it, the longer that book would take, Absalom would take me to get through again. Is that many more books that I don't think I would be able to make it through. So here we are. This is episode 22 of this. We're probably 27 weeks in. No, that's not fair, because the first few weeks I was doing 2 at a time. We're probably 22-ish weeks in. I can't remember exactly when this came out. Maybe it was the first week of September, I think, something like that. And here we are, middle of January, however many weeks that is, that we've been with this book, and it is a grind as well. And As I Lay Dying was the most rewarding reread I've ever been through. But I still don't know that I can do that Faulkner Absalom a second time. I think I am more likely to do As I Lay Dying a third complete time than I am to do Absalom again. Callum says, back to the old style. And what Callum is referring to here is the fact that in the poetry discussions that I've started doing, I have started doing a different type of video where I have the poem on screen and the me in the corner. And I really think that's been fruitful for the poetry discussions. I've only done it once, but on my personal channel, a link to which can be found in the description below. And I'm creeping up on 1,000 subscribers over there. It would really mean a lot to me if you were not subscribed over there, if you went down there and just hit the subscribe button. Go over there, check it out. If you don't like it, don't stick around. But I'm really trying to hit 1,000 subscribers before my birthday, and if you could help me out, it really would mean a lot. I'm at 904. I need 96 subscribers. But I'm going to be experimenting a little bit more with video types, I think, going forward. I'm going to try to get a different camera for my computer so that the quality can be a little bit better up there, and I will have Microsoft just bought, what is it here? Give me 1 second and I will try to, they bought a software company known as Clipchamp, and apparently it is much better than the Microsoft video editor that I had been using. So we will see what goes on with that. Crybaby Film says, Have you heard, because I was mentioning Danse Macabre by Stephen King, says, have you heard Danse Macabre by Ghost? I had not. Now I have. It reminds me, it sounds like Eddie from Rocky Horror Picture Show and Journey had a baby. And honestly, the lead singer sounds a little bit like Weird Al Yankovic. So, just going to throw that out there. So, what happened in this, the 22nd chapter of Fairy Tale? Charlie and the other prisoners are led up from the bowels of prison and out onto a grand playing field. And then they start jogging laps. When they start jogging laps, Charlie notices wealthier patrons watching them in their warm-ups. They jog, then they throw the medicine ball back and forth a bit, then they jog some more. Then they do pull-ups. Pull-ups surprisingly hard. Surprisingly few people can do pull-ups. If you've never tried, you might be watching this and think, I can do pull-ups. Probably you can't. More jogging, and then tackling dummies, something with which Charlie is familiar. Then a little bit of sparring, and Charlie spars with Amit. Amit had tripped Charlie during their run, and Charlie beats the ever-loving tar out of Amit, which leads to this passage on 402. Amit screamed in pain. Cry off, I cry off. I didn't care what he cried. I swung again and hit him in the arm. He turned and began to run, but he was running out of breath. Also, those bow legs. I looked at Kellen, who shrugged and swept a hand at my erstwhile foe, as if to say, as you will. I took it for that anyway. I went after Amit. I could tell you I was thinking about the shoulder check and how the whole people in the box had laughed when I went down. I could tell you I was thinking about how Jaya had tripped over me and gone sprawling. I could even tell you that I was making sure no one else would decide to mess with the new boy. None of that would have been true. None of the others had shown the slightest animus towards me, except, maybe, for I. And that was before he got to know me a little. After this passage, Charlie has a taste for blood. Later, in the locker room, Amit approaches Charlie and says he believes Charlie to be the one. Percy even brings Charlie cake, and when he does, he bows to him. In the middle of the night, everyone is asleep except for Hammy, who's having a bowel movement that ends up waking up everyone else. And when they have something to say about it, Charlie wards them off. After, Charlie asks if Flight Killer is aka Gog Magog, and when he asks if Flight Killer is, quote, Gog Magog, end quote, there is an earthquake, the walls shake, the jets that are on the wall shoot out blue flame, and Hammy puts his hand around Charlie's neck and says, hey, don't say that name. Do you want to wake up the thing which is in the dark well? That is what happened in this chapter. The first thing I want to talk about in Lit Crit here. There are a couple ideas presented with, well, one idea that's not presented and one idea that is presented, and it's sort of, these notions are sort of just adopted with a shrug and an oh, well. Where is Charlie's desire to escape? Where is it? Charlie does not seem to want to escape, even though he knows that Radar is out there running away. Radar is out there running around, and may not have found her way towards anyone who cares about her. Now, with all of that going on, Charlie seems completely content to just sit and rot in this prison. He is not scheming on breaking out. He is not asking if anyone else has broken out. He's just sort of sitting there and going through the motions. They take him out to the field of play and he doesn't bolt for the exit. None of this happens. None of this happens. He knows that these people really don't want to kill him, and he doesn't risk it anyhow. There's no attempt at a prison break, which is utterly confounding, especially when you pair this with the fact that everyone there seems to be under first off, this idea of the one. Why wasn't this mentioned to Charlie beforehand at all? This was not mentioned to Charlie, at least to my recollection, until he gets to the prison and is asked if he is the one. Maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe I'm forgetting. Maybe it had come up and I just wasn't paying attention. I don't think it had come up until he's at the prison, where all of a sudden it is a completely ubiquitous idea. Everyone knows about the one. And when it's mentioned, Charlie just kind of, oh, maybe I'm the one. I mean, I'm pretty the one-ish. I'm pretty special. Sure, I could be the one. You don't know that I'm not. He just sort of adopts this idea and thought process. It's sort of, kind of, really like the rest of this novel, where things just kind of come up and they're presented, or they go away and they're forgotten. Speaking of things that go away and they're forgotten, we have the return of something that I had been harping on for the past few chapters. I had made a big deal about the fact that a lot of the things that made Charlie Charlie, he just gives up in the beginning of this novel. When was the last time we heard his mother mentioned? Very early in the novel, and really not since, surely, really not since he has been in Impus. What about his dad? Dear old dad, sort of been put on the back burner as well. And the sports, they were dropped. Charlie was definitionally a jock. Okay, that's fine. We can go along with a jock type character. Everyone would be fine with that, except that he just abandoned the sports. Here we have the return of all of those things he'd worked on. He is good at swinging what appears to be an axe haft. He's good at swinging that because he had been good at baseball. He's good in pursuit and tackling because he had been good at football. So we have the return of these ideas, these characteristics from early in the novel. Great. Where will they go? It's hard to say. What would be interesting at this point? Because we have no reason to believe Charlie is really the one. We have every reason to believe that Charlie has been cast as the one because of his characteristics. We have a little bit, I guess, of reason to believe that he is the one because of these blonde hair, blue-eyed characteristics that are sort of rising out of nowhere. And they're really rising out of nowhere. If I all of a sudden overnight started going blonde and my eyes started changing color, I'd be a little freaked out. Now, it's easy to say that from my apartment, not in a completely new world. If you make this trek to a completely new world and you're meeting all of these strange characters, maybe the idea of being the one and all of a sudden having blonde hair and blue eyes would not be all that otherwise surprising. Maybe. Still seems weird to me. So these things are coming back. What would be interesting to me is, instead of Charlie being the one, maybe Charlie acts as if, right? I don't know if you've seen Boiler Room. Act as if. If Charlie begins to act as if, and indeed has a little bit of success acting as if, and then emerges the one. That would be an interesting conundrum and dynamic in a book that I've never seen. I've never seen that in a movie, a TV show, anything. That would be fascinating. But I don't know if we're going to get it. So I have one more thing to talk about here before we get to the really big, sort of troubling idea here. Um, I, I, okay, we're going to go here first. 393 into 394. Don't try that, I puffed, or they'll whip you until you bleed. How does he get away with it? Because they know he can't do this, that's why. He's Mr. Useless, ain't he? But he's whole, and without him, they're back down to 30. I don't see how... I mean, once the fair one starts, assuming it ever does, how can they expect him to, fight? They don't, I said, and I detected a strange note in his voice. It could have been sympathy. Or maybe, fellow feeling. It wasn't that he liked Hamie. It was that he liked the situation we were in less. That's an interesting dynamic. I hope moving forward, or it's a lost opportunity, I hope we spend some more time there. The fact that these people don't like each other, but they have some type of sympathy for one another because of the situation in which they find themselves. How is that used, utilized, and twisted when they get into the fair one, which is supposed, I guess, a death competition, right? A fight to the death. Someone must win. But if it is a death competition with all of these people, a death tournament, how do all these people know about the previous fair ones, right? I'm assuming there is no experience here with the previous fair ones, but if the fair one, if these people are privy to the knowledge of the fair one, that means they were around for it. If they were around for it, why weren't they in it? Why wasn't the fair one 108? Why wasn't the fair one 216? Why did we have whole ones running around that were not forced to fight to the death? Another interesting dynamic that comes up in this chapter, when Percy had mentioned before that Charlie should keep his hair covered, keep it dirty, don't wash it, it did not seem to me that if Charlie was to be the chosen one, he was meant to lead the Percy types, the Greys, as well. In this chapter, with Percy bowing to Charlie, it seems as if the chosen one, the Savior, will save not only the whole ones who find themselves imprisoned, but also the Grey people. That is interesting. That is a dynamic I did not see coming. Now, the final lit crit thing that I have to talk about here. I talked a little bit last time about the idea of the chosen one. We talked a little bit, I think it was either the chapter before that or 2 chapters before, that we have the sort of slow trickle of ideas about, actually this might have started like 10 chapters ago, with the idea of the royal blood meaning something, actually meaning something, being worth something, as opposed to in the world we find ourselves in, we think, oh yeah, those, the lineage of the king and the queen, it's kind of they're neat people. But it doesn't mean anything. They don't have more IQ points. They're not better on the soccer field, whatever sport they play in England, if there are sports, in fact, in England, I don't know. The royal family might be kind of neat, but they're not special. They might be kind of neat, but they're not better than. They might be pretty privileged, but they're not superior. So here, we have this idea in Impus introduced of the royal family, and that the royal blood actually means something, which puts us sort of more middle age-ish type of setting. We can understand that, right? We've been in these types of stories before. We're familiar with history and the idea that the king was divinely inspired by God, was closer, in fact, to being a deity than the regular folk. We can understand that idea. Here, we have introduced the idea of the chosen one. The idea that there will be someone to come along and save everyone. There will be someone who comes along and is so pure that his very presence will make the other people around him demure. They will sort of worship him, and they should, right? Why shouldn't they? He's better than them. He is more person than they are. He is better at peopling than are they. We might even call him, what's a word like super? Like, going back towards Middle Age, German was a lot more prevalent back in these Middle Age time. Uber, right? Uber's a good German word. And how would you say, like, the better, Ubermensch? That makes sense, doesn't it? Ubermensch. He'd be the superior man. And the superior man, we should probably have some way of visually setting him apart. Something like, I don't know, blonde hair and blue eyes. That would seem more pure. That would seem more chosen one. More sort of pure-blooded. To be blonde-haired and blue-eyed, right, guys? That's the Nazi ideals. We're talking about Nazi ideals here. But then we get this on 405. Of course I am, I thought. Tall, Caucasian, now blonde, maybe blue-eyed, all too soon. A dashing prince right out of a Disney animated feature. Not that I felt much like dashing anywhere, and the whole thing was absurd. What Disney prince had ever smeared caca on a windshield or blown up a mailbox with a cherry bomb? Stephen, Mr. King, I'm knocking on your door to let you know, it doesn't sound like you're writing a Disney fairy tale. It sounds like you're writing a book about a struggle. In his first person, right? So it is his story. It's sort of like a Mein Kampf, right? Stephen, you're not writing a Disney fairy tale, you're writing Nazi propaganda. Okay? I just gotta put that out there. That's what we're getting 22 chapters into this. Moving on to writer's notes. I'm not going to point this sort of thing out every time it happens, but I think that it is absolutely a useful thing to put out there once in a while at least, because it is a useful reminder for anyone who is attempting to write scenes between people. Watch where you're, this is Amit, who's saying, "Watch where you're going, Uli," he said. "Ain't no God to protect you here. You has left that all behind." Now, why do I bring this up? I've brought something like this up in the past. This is a character in this story talking in a circle. You've got 3 sentences here from Amit. Watch where you're going, Uli. Ain't no God to protect you here. You has left that all behind. Now, I'm going to read this through one more time. Just soak it in. Watch where you're going, Uli. Ain't no God to protect you here. You has left that all behind. How much more streamlined and in character does this sound? Watch where you're going, Uli. Ain't no God to protect you here. That sounds much more threatening. That sounds much more direct and to the point. You leave off that last sentence, and all of a sudden, you have a character who's simply making a statement. But instead, let's drop the first sentence. So here's the whole thing again. Watch where you're going, Uli. Ain't no God to protect you here. You has left that all behind. When you drop that first sentence, you get this. Ain't no God to protect you here. You's left that all behind. How much more direct and threatening is that? Because we have a character. This is when Amit shoulder checks Charlie and knocks him over. That is your introduction to the interaction. And then you're going back and having Amit tell Charlie, watch where you're going. You don't need that. You've already watched where he's going. You've already shown him where he's going. The much more concise way to do this scene, Amit shoulder checks him. Ain't no God to protect you here. You left that all behind. How much more threatening is that? That is a streamlined way to really make your point. I have one more note here, and then we are done here. Stephen King has introduced the idea that Charlie is hearing and saying different things than we have on the page. Okay, we understand. Reintroduce it once in a while, you're fine. We have it here, 394 and 395, we have it on kissing pages. We have it 3 pages later. We have it, I think, 5-ish pages after that as well. We have it here. That poor sucker's just a warm body. Cannon fodder. Only he didn't say sucker, and he didn't say cannon fodder. That was just how my mind translated whatever idiom he had used. They like seeing one match decided fast. Okay, if that is our one reminder this chapter, that's fine, but it's not. We get it time and time again. Here is one of the more sort of, you have to trust your reader. And one of the more interesting ideas that I ever picked up on in my entire grad degree program was this. If you're writing a character with an accent, introduce it once at the beginning of your story, where you're sort of writing in that character's tongue. Your reader will pick it up there and remember it the rest of the story and sort of translate from there. It's a really weird thing that happens and you don't realize it, but you do it when you're reading. If all of a sudden at the beginning of your story, you have a character speak something like, what am I supposed to do? What am supposed, S-P-O-S-T, supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? It's a little southernish, little southern Midwestern kind of. Your readers will remember that and follow that accent through your story with that character. A good reader will. And if a reader doesn't, probably this is a reader to whom that accent would be extremely unuseful anyhow. And I'm not making an elitist kind of argument here. What I'm saying is, as we become more dedicated readers, as we become more experienced readers, as we become better readers, we are able to add the nuance to the page ourselves. Like, remember, there's probably some book that you read when you were too young to read it. I read Michael Crichton in middle school. I was too young for it, really. However, Michael Crichton described his characters did not matter to me because I was familiar with all of the movies that had been made of these books, and those were the people cast in the books to me. I was an inexperienced, sort of dumb reader. His explanation on the page did me no good. If there is sort of an inexperienced reader in this book, Stephen King repeating over and over and time again, these weren't the words that Amit used, but they were the words that I understood. That reader's not going to pick up on that anyway. A more experienced reader, we're here sharing this video on YouTube, you and me. We're a more experienced reader, aren't we? We're a more dedicated reader. Stephen King told us that this world was translating for him way back when he first started talking to other characters in this world. I've remembered it since then. I promise you that you do too. So, a less experienced reader is getting nothing out of this reminder on the page that these aren't the real words being passed back and forth. A less experienced reader isn't getting anything from that. A more experienced reader is just kind of irritated that we keep getting it time and time again. If you're going to write a character with an accent, use it at the beginning of your story. Maybe a little bit as it goes on, but just fade it out until you're using now the actual word usage should remain different if you're writing a character with an accent. But you should not be sort of doing the misspelling the words to sound phonetically like the person is using them. What am I supposed to do? What am AH space SPOST space to do? Do that once. A good reader will take it with them. A less experienced reader won't get anything out of it anyway. That is all I have for this, the 22nd chapter, the 22nd episode in a 34-ish part series as we journey chapter by chapter through Fairy Tale by Stephen King. And I hope to have you back next week for chapter 23. But don't forget, between now and then, we've got poetry on Mondays. And on Mondays, we have poetry. And I hope to have you here for that as well.